We're here today in Accra, Ghana with Regina Honu, founder of Soronko Solutions. Thank you so much for making the time to meet with us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just start with what exactly is Soronko Solutions?
So Soronko Solutions is a technology social enterprise. We have, a for-profit and a non-for-profit. So the for-profit, we build software for small and medium-scale enterprises and some large corporates. And for our non-for-profits, we run two main projects. There's one called Tech Needs Girls, which is a mentorship program aimed at getting girls from 6 to 18, teaching them how to code and create technology. And then we run a coding and human-centered design academy for children and adults called Soronko Academy. So in a nutshell, we're involved in using technology really to drive social change.
How did you come up with the idea?
So for me, growing up, I went through different challenges, especially when I decided that I wanted to become a computer scientist. And back then it was like computer science is for boys and girls don't do it. And when I eventually studied computer science in university, there were like three ladies in the class. And then when I went into work in corporate Ghana, I worked in two banks. I was the only female in the IT department. And I suffered anything you can think of: discrimination, sexism, stereotyping. But what was interesting was my earning power was higher than my colleagues, because I had a skill that paid well and that was in demand. And I saw firsthand, the opportunities within the tech space, but also how it was so male dominated. But also another thing for me was my relationship with science and technology was very awkward, because when I was in senior secondary school, I like to question things, and we didn't have that in our educational system. So the teacher is the body source of knowledge. If the teacher says 1+1 is 5, 1+1 is 5, you cannot be asking any other questions. And I had the opportunity to go to Norway for an exchange program that really changed my life. And during that exchange program, I decided to do science also. And when I left Ghana, I was the best student, not only in science, but in the whole school, because they actually had a league table where they graded. And what I quickly realized while I was in Norway was that I could not apply any of the principles that I had learned. So I can draw a very advanced electrical circuit, but if you give me two wires and a bulb, I'll just be looking at you like, what's supposed to happen here, And so when I came back, I started to question more. I started to say, okay, when they say osmosis is the movement of water from, an upward to a downward motion through a semi-permeable membrane, what does that mean? And how do you apply that? But then I was quickly told, we have to cover the syllabus, and I'm dragging the class back, and I think I've traveled and all of that stuff. So for me, I really thought, like, can't Africans make something that the rest of the world uses? Must we always just be kind of waiting for the developed nations to invent and create things and then we use them? And I thought it was really about using science and technology in a more practical way, and also teaching that skill to evoke creative thinking and problem solving. So those were the two things in my mind. How do I get more women into technology, but also how do I change how science and technology is taught with children?
So what were your first steps?
So, I wasn't socialized to be an entrepreneur. I thought entrepreneurs are born and not made. And I thought, you have to be a special kind of person, and I was socialized like an average Ghanaian girl. And what that means was that I could even barely maintain eye contact, because a good Ghanaian girl must be seen and not heard. So you don't, you just follow all the rules, you check all the boxes. And I was that girl that followed all the rules, checked all the boxes. I never colored outside the lines. So for me, when the concept of leaving to start something, it was very scary. I always say I put a snooze button on my dreams, but I always had this desire. But because I kind of felt I was never ready. In fact, the day that I resigned to start my own business, I didn't know when I woke up in the morning that I was going to quit my job. It was like a regular day. I went into work. I just had this strong feeling. And I remember I went into the bathroom to pray, because it was like, a very big decision. I'm quitting my well-paid job to nothing. I didn't even have a business plan. Like I said, I didn't have any plan. So after I just quit, I got a table and a laptop. I actually moved back home because I could get free internet at my parents' house. So I moved back home. I was working at the back room in my parents' house, and I had to sort of leverage on my weakness to be my strength. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So just based on the fact that I was shy, reserved, and hadn't built any network, what I started to do is I would go to every single tech-related event, and then find the most charismatic, the most popular person in the room, introduce myself to that person, and then follow that person everywhere. So then when people would meet that person and I was standing right there, they would think, we are together. And then I would give them my business card. And I also decided that because I didn't know how to go to people, what I would do is I would strategically position myself such that opportunity finds me. So at the time, I said, okay, I'm going to use social media to brand myself as a thought leader in my space. So if you want somebody who is speaking to women and girls in technology for social change, you should find me. And so I was very active and deliberate about using my social media platforms for that messaging. That was the only thing I posted constantly, 4 or 5 times a day. And that was when my first big break came. I was published in a book Sheryl Sandberg was writing. And then after that, CNN came, BBC came, Al Jazeera came. But I think it was a process. The first one was me telling myself, or let me rephrase. The first one was me muting the voice that was telling me that I'm not capable of doing this, I'm not good enough for this, and then actually, understanding what is the problem I'm trying to solve and figuring out how to do that.
I would be very curious to know, now that you have done it, even though before you thought that it required a very special type of person, what would you say are the things that make an entrepreneur? Like, if someone wants to go out there and start something, what should this person know that I need to have this type of skill or so?
So I think what would make a good entrepreneur, first off, is how passionate you are about whatever it is that you're trying to do. If you've identified a problem and you have a solution that is marketable, right? So sometimes, you have an individual that will just copy and paste what seems to be working. You must be really providing a solution that is marketable. And you must be very passionate and resilient as an individual, because entrepreneurship is a roller coaster of many different rides, and if you have passion and resilience, and I think your risk appetite. So another thing that I had to quickly work on was my appetite for risk. Sometimes it's good to stay in your comfort zone. That's when you do a 9 to 5. But when you're stepping out as an entrepreneur, you really have to push yourself. If I'm comfortable, then I know that something is wrong. That means I'm not doing enough. That means I'm just playing it safe. So I constantly am pushing myself and stepping out of my comfort zone, doing things that I'm uncomfortable with. For me, I even had to develop a whole new persona because, like I said, I was shy and reserved. But I realized that, that wasn't going to get me anywhere. I would go into meetings trying to negotiate for a deal and leave with the least package on the table because I was just given what I was taking, and I had to learn how to assert myself, how to be this confident person. So I developed a whole new self, and I would tell myself, this is the CEO Regina. Turn her on when you go for a meeting. Then after the meeting, I can turn off and be regular me. And also you have to build a strong network. I think it would be very difficult to think you would go on this journey alone as an entrepreneur. It's important that you find the right people first, even your immediate circle. So I was fortunate that my family was supportive. And it's important that, you find the right team. And it's also important that you find somewhat of a support system, because I think people forget the mental, stability that an entrepreneur needs to have to go through all the ups and downs, all the highs and lows that come on the journey. So for me, if there's any skill that you need to have as an entrepreneur, you need to be passionate, you need to be resilient, you need to be adaptable, and you need to ask for help. You know, don't go on it alone, and some things have been done. Don't reinvent the wheel. Where you can get support, get that support. And like there's a proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So go with as many people as you can, and that will help you get to where you need to go.
Let's talk a bit more about what the two programs look like.
So with the for-profit, I was actually moved more by social impact. So a little bit in my own journey, I had the opportunity to be interviewed at Microsoft. So Microsoft flew me. I went to the Redmond campus, and obviously to work at Microsoft would have been a dream come true. But while I was there, I was thinking, we have this thing called the brain drain, where the brightest and the best would leave the continent. So I mean, obviously, if I work at Microsoft, I will be one of the millions of people there, and my contribution would not be as significant as if I came back and I tried to think of something. So when I came back, I was really thinking, what can I do? I wanted to work for social impact because that was really where my heart was. But I didn't like how NGOs operated because they relied solely on donor funding. And I'd seen a lot of amazing NGOs where as soon as donor funds run out, the project ends. So I thought, okay, how can I build a self-sustaining social impact project? So I figured, why don't I use my skills, which is software development, create a for-profit company, and then when I make profit, I use it to run the non-for-profit. And so with the for-profit, the goal was really to fund the non-for-profit. So I looked at what is the lowest hanging fruit. 80 to 90% of businesses in Ghana are small and medium scale enterprises. But a lot of the tech companies were focusing on the large corporates, the multinationals, because that's where the big money is. But I thought if I develop local customized tech solutions for this market, then even though I would not make like a huge big payout in one transaction, I could make a lot that would then culminate into that one big, payout. And I felt that that was really an untapped market. And for that market, there was a lot of need for digital and tech solutions to help them grow their businesses, and to help them sort of keep with trends. But there wasn't a lot of organizations looking within that space. So I started to focus on small and medium scale enterprises. And I run mostly on referrals, so I would do a couple for two, and then they would tell somebody, then they would tell somebody. And the challenge also at the time was because developers are not paid very well here, what they will do is they'll take multiple jobs. So what that means is that they can't deliver well. So I decided to create another brand for myself in that space to deliver exceptional work. So instead of taking as many jobs, I would take only a few and make sure that I deliver. So under promise, over deliver. So then I could sort of direct the clients that I had, and then attract even bigger ones because then I would have built a brand that I'm really good at what I do. And so that's exactly what happened. I was building software customized for SMEs. Then some large corporates came. So then I had money. I used 80% of my profits to set up a non-for-profit. Now, when you're setting up a non-for-profit, the first thing that advice that you get is, oh, go to the villages, the rural areas, and the other advice that you get is ask the government, go to the government. I did both. I went to the rural community. My first project was called Growing STEM, Growing Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Skills. I went to the rural areas. But what was interesting was we were teaching science and math in a more practical way. So we would take in computers and mentor and people to teach. As soon as the computers come out, the boys will come, the girls will be sitting in the corner, and they weren't participating. And in one of the sessions, a boy and a girl come. The boy tells the girl the laptops are just for boys, and then the girl says, "But I am a girl because I was the one who was holding the laptop." So then I thought, oh, okay, to get more girls, they need to see role models, other women like them in the space. And I thought it would be very interesting because even for my own personal journey, I had been a minority and in a very male dominated space. So then I decided that I would do another project called Tech Needs Girls, which is a mentorship program. So I figured that mentorship was a very important component. And at the time, there were lots of programs, but they were targeted at teaching people how to consume technology. So how do you use Microsoft Office? How do you use Microsoft PowerPoint? Nobody was thinking about how to create technology. I thought, why go back to what everybody is doing? I think I can stand out by teaching girls how to code, how to create technology. And I remember in the beginning, everybody was like, it's not going to work. The girls are not going to get it. It's so advanced, you know. You know, girls are not built for math and science. They are naturally inclined for the arts. I don't know what that means. So I got a lot of backlash in the beginning, and people thought it was too out there, you know. But I believe that we could teach girls how to code. And I thought it was all about how you tailor the content. Interestingly enough, from the life cycle of education, like when you go to preschool, kindergarten, they are female teachers. Once you go to primary school and you start studying science and maths, then male teachers. You know, you don't have any female teachers. So you start seeing, you know, the stereotype of this is more for men, this is more for men. And that even affects how information is delivered. Because when a curricula is taught by a particular generation, a particular gender, they give certain examples that is relatable to them. And it's taught in their perspective, right? Men and women have different perspectives. So if men are the ones teaching science and tech most of the time, then they're teaching it in the way that they understand. And then there's that disconnection for women and girls. So for me, I felt that it was all about how you deliver the content, you know, and so we found a very interesting way that we could connect with the girls now. So if we're going to teach algorithms, at the time there was a very popular dance called Azonto. So we use Azonto to teach algorithms. You know, if we're going to talk about, you know, software development, we'll talk about how you can create makeup and dresses with, you know, softwares, and then the girls would be excited. So it was really about delivering that same sort of technical component in a language and a way that girls would understand. And then so we started running the project. We did a pilot in Kumasi, and then we started working in an urban slum in Accra. And the challenge there was early child marriage. So we were upskilling the girls and then getting them to learn the skill to help them continue to go to school and also make some money. So we worked in the slum for I think a year. And during that time, there were several learnings. You know, when you go into the social enterprise space, the assumption is that because you are doing social work, everybody's on board, right? And for me, I learned the hard way that sometimes there may be some individuals that are there for their own reasons. So when we worked in the slum, one thing that we got a lot of was attention, and especially from the media, because this was a different story. It was a different narrative. And the way I presented our work was from the solution. I use social media a lot, and most people, when they would start organizations, they told the story from the problem. So you would probably go to the community, take pictures of the kids looking. What I didn't do was take any picture because I don't believe there's human dignity in showing somebody in their worst state, right? So what I would do is would get the girls, everybody would have a nice t-shirt, working on the computers. Those were the pictures that I would show. And I would have my friends that are professional cameras take really nice pictures of the girls to have a picture tell you, you know, how their faces would light up when they would learn, you know, something on the computer, how they would leave coming in thinking that, you know, technology is not for them and leave thinking that this is something that they wanted to do, how they would build their first mobile app or their first web application and be so excited about it. And so that was the story that I told. But the challenge was with more media attention that we got, the community and some of the leaders, you know, would always ask, okay, so we think you are getting all this money. And, you know, sometimes people just come and tell a story and don't really give you anything. And so I had to quickly understand that you have to bring everybody on board and let everybody sort of understand what everybody's expectations are when you're doing a particular project. And because we didn't control the space, we would go into the community. We couldn't really control what happens. So unfortunately, we had to leave working in that community because it was not safe. And the partners that we worked with, if there's no trust, that's a challenge. Then we moved into another community. But once again, we didn't control the space. So we can't really control what happens. And so I thought, okay, what can we do to fix that problem? But also the other issue is, if you're teaching technical skills, you're teaching coding, it's nice if you go into a community with laptops, with trainers. So we had women mentors that were teaching coding. But once you leave, if you come back after 6 months, they've forgotten everything. So it's really a nice, you know, media piece story, but impact, you know. And most of the time, there's the focus on the beginning of the project. Oh, it's nice. This project is long. The stories the girls tell. But when you go back, and when a community doesn't understand what an empowered girl is, if she goes back to that community empowered, they beat her down even more. So you can't just empower people and leave them. You have to empower people and still work with them. You have to create that enabling environment. So it's not just about the beneficiary, but it's about all the additional pieces, that come together. So we also quickly had to learn that, look, we can't just come in with equipment, do trainings, and then go and leave the girls. It amounts to nothing. In fact, when we come back, the girls are even in a worse state than they were before we came. So we decided that then we have to set up an academy, a safe space where the girls could keep coming to have access to resources. We could monitor their progress, but also we could have a structured program, and we could create other programs to create that enabling environment. So the parents could come for an open house. We could engage with the parents. We could engage with the teachers, different stakeholders, such that when we empower the girls, when they go back, there's support, and then there's that continuum. So then we set up an academy. And with the academy, we then started having parents who had boys say, okay, now the boys are going to be disadvantaged because we're doing so much work, so much great work with girls. And another thing that we also realized from our classes was when we had all girl classes, that was a safe space, they were speaking up. As soon as we introduce one boy, because when we worked in Nima, we don't turn children away. So if a boy comes, we'll not say go home. We'll let the boy in. They went back to real world scenario. So if the boy was a dominant character, the girls then went back to being shy and reserved because in the real world, they interact with boys. But in the safe space where they are just girls, they feel more comfortable. So then we thought, okay, then we have to disrupt this notion where they don't feel as comfortable with boys. So then we decided that we're going to open up the academy for boys. And so we now open up the academy. We start from 5 years old because we believe it's important to start early for boys. Then we had UNESCO came and said, look, can you teach deaf children how to code? We were like, can we? Let's give it a try. So we took upon that challenge, and then we tweaked our curriculum to teach deaf children how to code. And then we had a mother who had an autistic child and said, can you teach my autistic son to code? And then we said, can we? So we looked at, how do we tweak our curriculum again to teach autistic children to code. So then the academy really became a space for anyone, and then we started to work on the piece of what happens next, because that was a big question. After you've taught somebody how to code, how to create software, what happens next? And we quickly found out that it's not enough to just train and expect that things will just fall in line. So what we started to do now is we are now actively involved in connecting our students and our beneficiaries with opportunities. So after any training, we connect you with opportunities. For the children, we keep monitoring them, but for the adults, we connect them with different opportunities. We're also working on a skills assessment tool for digital jobs where you assess your skills online. If you pass the assessment, it connects you with a job. If you don't, it just connects you with more training, both offline and online. We're also working on a radio show about technology in local language because we realize that language is a factor. When the privileged minority start talking a lot about, tech and innovation, and they throw in all these new things, artificial intelligence, blockchain, IoT, they are really leaving the majority of Ghanaians behind because they may nod and smile, but they have no idea what is happening. And so for us, we feel that if we don't bring everybody along, it will be really hard to push new technologies here for them to reach mass market. So we felt that it's important to break down what is technology, what is innovation, why is it important in local language. So we're actually working on a radio program to ensure that we create that enabling environment. And then the last piece that is a big piece for me is on policy. Like I said, I don't think we alone can solve this problem. So I think it's important that we bring different stakeholders and we have that conversation about how can we create great policies such that the work outlives us, right? So I am very big on the policy space and engaging different stakeholders. And I believe in public-private partnerships on ensuring that, we create certain policies to have that enabling environment such that social innovation scales, because that's the challenge. You have pockets of amazing social innovation, but the issue is, does it scale? So in a nutshell, is really what I do with the for-profit and then the non-for-profit.
Yeah, so I've heard you mention once or twice about the importance of working with other people to move as far as you can, and I'm just curious how you are working with other players or other companies such as yourself or organizations and so on to solve this problem in Ghana, for example.
So for us, we look at different partnerships at different levels. So when it comes to identifying beneficiaries, we do a lot of partnerships there. So when we go into communities, for example, we engage with community leaders and we find organizations that already work with women and girls. So we never go into a community and say, oh, we're going to start engaging with the girls by ourselves. We look at the community and say, oh, which organization already works with women and girls in that community? How can we partner and bring the digital and tech to whatever it is that they're doing? So that's what we did when we worked in the urban slum, and that's what we do now when we go outside in the region. So we operate in Accra and 8 other regions, and we also operate in Burkina Faso. So Burkina Faso again is a partnership with another organization. Also, when we want to go to the public schools, we look at partnerships. So we've partnered with a public school, and then we have that sustained engagement. So that's on the beneficiary side. We also have programs with adults. And once again, we do a lot of partnerships to get these beneficiaries because we believe these partnerships are important. Then when it comes to providing the solutions, we also look at where are our gaps. So, for example, when we started, we focused on digital and tech, but the soft skills is an important component. If you don't have confidence, if you can't articulate yourself, even though you've built an amazing software, you can't sell it. You can't tell somebody what you are doing, then you might as well not have built the software. So, for us, it was important that we also work on the soft skills. So we looked at partners who have been working in that space and are good at that. So we partnered with a couple of organizations to deliver soft skills training, leadership, entrepreneurship, public speaking, pitching, networking, negotiation, the bulk of that. We also look at when it comes to connecting with opportunities. Once again, it's partnerships. So we're currently engaged with a partner that is a job matching portal that's going to help us, link our beneficiaries to opportunities. We've signed a partnership with an incubator where the women in our program are able to, if they want to start a business, go to that incubator and get seed funding and also more training to help them start their business. We've also partnered with different hubs when we're going into the regions to see how they can continue, have access to resources. So everything that we do at all the different stages is some type of partnership. So we don't come in and say, okay, we're just going to do everything ourselves. No. And for us, one of the things that we want to do is we wanted to introduce coding to public schools. So what we do is we partner with a school in Kumasi where we're running a pilot. So everybody in that school learns how to code. And for us, we are understanding what does that look like. What does it look like when somebody from class 1 learns to code? When they reach JHS3, what are they able to do? How do we evolve the curriculum to keep it fresh? Does it affect what they are learning in regular school? Are they better off? Are they worse off? Or does it enhance it? So we're really building a lot of use cases so that when we go to the government, we have data. So we don't want to go to the government with a great idea and say, okay, we can make this work. We want to go to the government and say, look, we've tested out the model. We have all these different use cases. We have all this data, and we've really tried it. And this is even a working concept of how you introduce coding to public schools. So partnership, for me, I think it's very important. And it'd be interesting to throw in that it's harder here to form those partnerships because entrepreneurs like to work in silos, and I really don't understand. And it's a struggle. So forming those partnerships, even though we like to do it, it's not easy. Naturally, you would think that there are some organizations that are natural alignments. We are in the same space, we are doing similar things. So it would just make sense for us to but it's actually hard. There will be several organizations that will be in similar space, but it's hard to engage because I don't know if maybe the entrepreneurs feel like they don't want to share or the market. I think one of the challenges is there's that fear when you're an entrepreneur that the donors and investors are few. So if you go with somebody else, you're competing for the same funds. So then I want to go alone, or you don't trust this other person. I really am not 100% sure what the problem is, but the truth is there is a challenge for us to work together. And this is why we're not making that huge impact that we can make, giving the resources and the people that we have on the continent. I think we really have to think about how do we solve that problem of us understanding that you can't go alone, and let's come and work together.
And speaking of funding, are you the not for profit is entirely funded by your for profit?
No, so the not for profit, okay, so this is what happened. The for profit was funding the not for profit in the beginning. Demand for the not for profit skyrocketed such that the for profit could not fund, continue to sustain the fund for the non for profit. Then what happened with the for profit was, because it was really started to fund the non for profit, and running both organizations well was quite a struggle. I decided to focus on the non-for-profit, and figure out how do I generate income from the non-for-profit activities that I do, and only keep the for-profit running at minimal. So right now with the for-profit, we still build software, but on very rare occasions, and it's very select customers, and then we generate revenue from the non-for-profits in different ways. So one of the ways is we charge fees at the academy for affluent parents or parents that can afford it, and we use that to offer scholarships to children that cannot afford it. We also go to corporates and say, let us help you with your innovation, and we tell corporates, your next customers are young people, and we work with young people. So we have corporates give us a problem that they're having in their organization, and then young people solve it, and the corporates pay for such engagements. And then we also still get like grants, donations, and then finally we give out the space. So we are well resourced at the academy. So if you are an organization, you want to run a training, you need a one-stop place to do that, you can come over to the academy. We give out the space for you to run any program, any training, and that you need to do. And then we have, like I said, very few organizations that we still build software for. And when we get software gigs, we just give it to our students.
Wow, that's I didn't even expect that, but wow. um, what did your very first community interaction or partnership look like?
So I think the very first one, which was like for a long period, was when we worked in the urban slum. So when I went there first, I'm neither Muslim, it's predominantly Muslim community. I'm neither Muslim. I come from a middle class family. So there was no way that I could connect with the parents on myself as an individual. So I understood that they'll be really wondering what my motives were. Why is this middle class young Ghanaian woman coming to say she's doing social work? So what made sense was to find a trusted individual in the community. So I identified a community leader. He was also running a program. And it was for me a little bit of having to reorient my mind, because I was really in a corporate bubble of how Ghana works, because I was coming from working in corporate Ghana to working and doing social work. And I had to empathize with the people and understand, their way of life. So I had to immerse myself in that community, because it would be presumptuous of me to be having come from a certain background to think I can relate just because you tell me a story. It's a different experience having to hear somebody and than it is to live the way they live. So in some communities, I would spend a week there, and that was even in the early stage, just to understand what it's like, because you can't understand something from when you're somewhere else. And in one of the communities, I stayed there. I remember I had to take a shower outside because I felt like the bathhouse was very dirty. I felt like there's no way I can go in there, and even just what they did at night, the foods available, just that community interaction. So that really helped me understand, how do I tailor programs for them? Not assume that I'm going to bring my middle class upbringing and tell them what is going to work in that community. So my first interaction was really learning, was really bringing myself to a point of understanding how the community works from their perspective. And for me, the best way to do that was to have that lived in experience. So I actually would spend some time there to really understand, so that then I could connect and I could empathize more with the people.
And how involved are you now in everything that happens within Soronko?
So I'm involved mostly just on strategy now. So I don't do day to day anymore, which I actually loved. But unfortunately, as you go up, your role has to change. So now I don't really know what happens day to day. Apart from like I have managers who would report what is happening day to day, but I'm not as involved. So now my main job is on strategy, and on sort of networks and connections. So that's what I spend majority of my time doing now. How do I really think about our next steps, where we need to go, and how do I build those partnerships, and find the resources to help us move to those next steps.
If you could partner with anyone right now, who would it be and why?
So I'm actually in my dream partnership, and it's with Mastercard Foundation. And what I like about that partnership is what Mastercard has this great goal of ensuring that 3 million Ghanaians are in dignified and fulfilling work, which aligns with what is our overall goal. So we're teaching digital skills because we believe that there's a demand for that skill, and it's going to help you reduce poverty, move out. But we are targeting women, and for that goal, Mastercard has set a 70% target of women. So we're looking at like about 2.1 million women and girls. And what they did was they brought different partners together to form one organization that balances each other. And I love that, right? So within the consortium of partners, we have government, we have private, we have public, and everybody looks at their strengths, and looks at where somebody else can complement this work. So we formed one big organization, or one big body, within the partnership, where we are complementing each other. So already I feel like this is really the way to go, and that is how we can deliver that impactful, scalable number of 3 million. So I'm already in my, and I'm looking to continue with such engagements. But I really like how they were intentional about coming in and identifying different stakeholders, and then us having a conversation on what is your strength, what is your weakness, what are the gaps, how can this partner complement this partner, so that we move together.
What is the one thing that you still feel that needs to happen or needs to change within the tech space and especially for women?
So I think the first thing that needs to change is the mindset, especially for women. I feel like within the tech space is such a fast evolving space that as an individual, you need to have a mindset of, I can do this, I'm adaptable, I'm resilient. What I see, especially for women and girls, is they hold themselves back when they come into the unknown. And tech evolves quickly, so you have to be in a space where like you rise to different opportunities and different challenges. I also think we need to have a conversation about the investment available within the tech space, and the types of solutions that are being created, and how do we scale those solutions. So there's been a conversation now. There was actually a piece done by an organization on the number of organizations that raised, African startups that raised $1 million in 2019. And when you look at the picture, it was neither representative of race or gender. There were like two women and mostly white males. So I think within the tech space, also the conversation on investment and funding of really great ideas. Because what I'm seeing happening is a lot of amazing ideas, but they don't reach scale. So some individuals will come up with a great product, a great software, but you can see that there's still a lot of struggle to reach scale with that idea. And a bigger player will just come, figure out that, oh, this is a cool thing, and then build it. And then the local players. So local players, even though they're doing amazing things, we're not doing it at a particular scale, because the investment conversation needs to happen more. And obviously, it has to be more friendly towards women, because apart from the gender bias for investments, apart from the race bias for investment, there's also the gender bias for investment. So I think for me, the first thing that would actually dent things is the women finding, changing that mindset and finding their strength and their resilience within that space.
I have one more question before I give it off to this young man. How do you keep yourself going?
That is a good question. So several things. So I actually, before even that question, my big challenge now is I'm a wife and a mother. And before, when people would ask that question about balance, I used to think like prioritize your time. I mean, come on, get a calendar of events. Like my biggest challenge is now the two. And when I'm asked that question of how do I keep myself going, is even for me, how do I balance all these three things? Because being a mother and being a wife and being an entrepreneur, all of those three things are very difficult things to do. And keeping my sanity. So before, I wanted to be the best mother. I wanted to be the best wife. I wanted to be the best entrepreneur. And then I was failing at all three, and I was losing my own self sanity. So I am driven in my entrepreneurial drive just by the amount of problems here and the fact that, if you have an innovative solution, it's going to impact so many lives, but also make a lot of sense. I am driven by being a mother to a daughter, even more my mission to empower women and girls, because I'm like, I'm doing the little bit of what I can to even leave the world a better place, not only for my daughter, but for millions of girls. But just seeing my daughter even inspires me more to keep going. I'm also driven by being a wife, and having a supportive husband, to help me keep the balance. So really what keeps me going is I believe in a biblical quotation that says, to him much is given, much is expected. And for me, I feel that I've been so blessed in my life, by the opportunities that I've had, that it's important that I give back. But also, I believe that there were women that made sacrifices to allow me to live the way I live now. It would be a disservice and really an injustice for me not to also make sacrifices to allow the next generation of women and girls to live better lives than I live now. So really, those are the two things that keep me going.
What would be your advice to young girls in Ghana?
So my advice to young girls in Ghana first is to mute the voice that tells you you can't do anything. You are more than what you think you are. You really have to push yourself and step out of your comfort zone. If somebody had told a 16-year-old me that I would be the woman I am today, I would have never believed it. Impossible, is something that they should remove. Anything is possible if you believe in it, if you pursue it, and to never give up. As a young girl, unfortunately, in a patriarchal society such as Ghana, the odds are not set for you. But believe, never give up, and then mute that voice that tells you you can't do anything.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.